We are live.
Good morning. I'm Antoinette Mosley, the Chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to the October 21st, 2025 remote meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. And to help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We're streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by calling 855-925-2801 and using meeting code 9791. Again, for those of you out there with us today, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 9791. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. I'll now go through and introduce all the committee members and staff who are participating virtually. Council and staff, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good morning.
Assistant City Attorney Carly Gillingham.
Good morning.
Community Economic Development Director Nikki Reed.
Good morning.
Community Development Division Manager James Shelton.
Good morning.
CDBG DR Program Manager Elma King.
Good morning.
Planning and Urban Design Director Steph Dahl.
Hello.
And our Affordable Housing Officer Sasha Vertinsky.
Good morning.
We'll now move to the first item on our agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from September 16, 2025. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Oh, second.
So Sage with the motion and Shanika with the second. I'll now go through and do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Myself, aye. The motion passes unanimously. Item number 2 on our agenda is an update to the Community Development Block Grant Policy. And here to walk us through is James Shelton, Community Development Division Manager. James.
Good morning. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Good morning, council members. James Shelton, Community Development Division Manager in the Community and Economic Development Department. We manage the Community Development Block Grant Program here in my office as part of our Steady State Entitlement Program. So this is separate from disaster recovery. This is not, we're not talking about CDBG DR with this policy. You can go to the next slide, please. So our policy for our Steady State CDBG program establishes general eligibility requirements necessary for CDBG funded programs. As I mentioned, this is separate from any DR policy, procedure, or program manual. This is specific to our steady state management of the CDBG program. We run a emergency repair and rehabilitation for residential properties program with our CDBG funding. And the policy manual maintains that all applicants for that program must enter into a legally binding agreement with the city or subrecipient partner organization to participate in that program. Additionally, for repair work valued greater than $10,000, we also require a lien with a promissory note and deed of trust to be entered between us and the homeowner. That lien requirement has become a significant deterrent for applicants seeking assistance, and staff are implementing a policy change to raise the limit to $25,000. Changes to our CDBG policy manual do not require committee or council approval, but we are required to share this information with the community, and we're seeking the ACD committee's feedback and concurrence with this change. Next slide. So our emergency home repair and rehabilitation program within CDBG funds hard costs for repairs. These look like essential improvements to the home, like replacing windows, doors, but can also be energy-related improvements, lead-based paint hazard reduction, repair and replacing major systems like HVAC or heating systems, as well as site improvements and utility connections and demolition. We can also help with soft costs like helping with credit reports, architectural and engineering fees, legal fees, appraisals, lead testing. And our traditional partners for this program have been organizations like Mountain Housing Opportunities or Asheville Area Habitat for Humanity. Next slide. Our current policy terms and conditions has language that says that all applicants for emergency repair or rehab of properties for households between 30% and 80% AMI must enter into a legally binding agreement with the subrecipient organization, like a MHO or Habitat, that places a lien on the property with a promissory note and deed of trust, unless the total value of the repair is under $10,000. What that means is you can get work done on your home through this program up to $10,000, and there's no lien requirement. There's nothing that says that you have to pay the money back. This policy that we have, though, for investments above $10,000 does protect the city's investments for affordability and occupancy. It ensures that when we make a significant investment in a home, that it's not quickly turned around and sold to a non-qualifying household. However, our partner organizations have indicated that this policy has led to many homeowners not wanting to participate in the program. The lien requirement and promissory note has become something of somewhat of a deterrent to folks. They are hesitant to take on a lien on their home. Next slide. The new policy that we are proposing is to raise that threshold for the lien requirement from $10,000 to $25,000. We're hoping that this will lead to more applicant uptake of the program, though this may introduce some risk to the city's program. For example, a homeowner could get $25,000 worth of work done on the property without a lien and promissory note, and then they could sell that property for a profit once work is complete, and the city's investment goes to that next buyer. However, staff do believe that this is a tolerable risk for the program given current repair needs in our community, and as well as the increased construction costs since our CDBG policy manual was first adopted. This threshold of $10,000 has not been changed for many years, and we are all aware that particularly since COVID as well as after Helene, that the cost of work to be done in our community on home repair has significantly increased. Next slide. So our CDBG policy manual, any revisions that are effective in there that we make are effective until they're superseded or canceled by appropriate notice from the Community Development Division. So this is us bringing notice to this committee today. We'll also be sharing it through our Community Development listserv and our email list that we have of all folks who've subscribed to get updates from us. We can also take comments and suggestions for changes, modifications, or improvements to this plan, and we encourage our community to notify us in writing to the Community Development Division at the email address provided here, as well as at the mailing address there. So if our community has any suggestions how we might modify or improve our policy manual, you can notify us in writing at through those methodologies. This revision is staff directed. Next slide. So again, our key takeaways is to change a policy for our CDBG program manual, separate from DR related policies and procedures. This is our steady state program, raising the lien threshold from $10,000 to $25,000 with the intention of getting more homeowners, increasing the appeal of the program to more homeowners. Again, this doesn't require committee or council approval, but we're required to share this information with the community, and we're seeking ACD's feedback and concurrence today. Next slide. Be happy to take any questions, and we appreciate your feedback.
So I'll go ahead and start. Thanks, James. This is really helpful. I'll just begin by saying I'm very much in favor of the raising of the threshold because I do totally understand why some would be reticent to take a lead, especially on the smaller amount. Just so we're clear, the $25,000 threshold is not in the aggregate, correct? What I mean is if I don't know, get some repair for 12,000 one year and then the next year need something for 20, I'm not required to have a lien placed on my property. It's $25,000 per hit.
Per activity for rehabilitation and repair, yes. I don't believe it's in our subrecipients nor really our program's interest to fund the same property every single year. We'd really like to see our subrecipients making investments across the city instead of going back to the same properties. And I don't think that happens very often, but to answer your question, yes, it is in the aggregate. So you could potentially see a homeowner who needs $75,000 worth of work. Our partner organizations can stack that financing where they can use this funding up to that $25,000 threshold and fund the rest of the $50,000 that they need to have fixed from other funding sources. This is just what the city is investing. Up to $25,000 would not require a lien.
And then say if the house is sold, that's when the payments comes due.
That is correct. So it's a deferred loan, non-interest bearing. It is not required to be repaid until the home is transferred.
Okay. Okay. Council, any other questions? Really? Okay. Well, thank you so much, James. Stay put though, because you have the next item on the agenda, which is item number 3, amending housing programs within the CDBG-DR action plan. Go right ahead, James.
Thank you very much. So now we are pivoting to disaster recovery. So separate from our steady state CDBG program, which we just discussed, we're now talking very much about our CDBG DR $225 million allocation and the action plan that we developed and was approved by City Council earlier this year and was approved by HUD as well. So we're looking to make some changes to that action plan. Next slide. So that action plan, again, it was approved by City Council back in April and approved by HUD in May. Our action plan included a maximum grant of $375,000 per home for the state-delivered Renew NC Rehabilitation and Reconstruction Housing Program. Council will recall that last week at Council, you authorized us to enter into that agreement with the state to administer that program on our behalf, where we are reimbursing them for hard construction costs. The state is increasing the maximum grant from $375,000 to $450,000 in their action plan to reflect construction cost realism. So the city seeks to align with the state's grant amount so that every Asheville resident can receive up to the full amount that every other Western North Carolina resident would be eligible for under this program. As what also our CDBG-DR action plan included a minimum project award amount of $500,000 under the Housing and Economic Security Support Services program. So separate program from the housing program. This is our public services type program. So the city seeks to lower the minimum project award amount from $500,000 down to $250,000 with the intent of widening the pool of eligible organizations with the financial capacity to deliver requested services. One other change that we're proposing is just a reference to the Code of Federal Regulations. This is super weedy and wonky. We won't get too far into that, but we're just making a citation correction in the action plan as well. City Council must authorize an amendment to the DR action plan, and city staff are here today requesting a recommendation from HCD to move this item forward to Council. Next slide. So back on April 8th, we presented the final action plan to City Council. City Council approved the action plan, and when I was there on April 8th, I made it very clear that I would be back to City Council with changes to the plan. This plan can be amended, and here we are 6 months later with our first proposed amendments to the plan. So there's 2 different categories of amendments. One is non-substantial, the other is substantial. Non-substantial amendments include allocating or reallocating funds within a monetary cap of $5 million established in the action plan. It also includes non-technical corrections or clarifications that don't impact program implementation, like that citation I mentioned a second ago. That's not a substantial amendment. We're just making a correction to a citation. Non-substantial amendments are also administrative updates like adjustments to reporting procedures or minor program modifications. However, a substantial amendment, next slide. A substantial amendment is triggered when we make changes in program benefit or eligibility criteria, including the expansion of eligible beneficiaries or the establishment of a new mid or most impacted and distressed area. That doesn't really apply to us, but what does apply is when we make changes to program benefits or eligibility, which is what we're proposing with this amendment to change award thresholds, it does trigger that substantial amendment. Substantial amendments are also when we make an addition or removal of an activity impacting the overall scope of recovery efforts, reducing the overall benefit requirement, which would be us proposing to invest less than 70% of our funds toward AMI, 70 toward AMI, toward AMI, LMI benefit. It will also include allocations or reallocations of funds exceeding the monetary threshold above $5 million. It also includes revisions to an incomplete initial action plan, which doesn't apply to us, but it would include updates to program award caps or our funding criteria, which we have a complete action plan, but we are changing award caps. The difference is between a non-substantial and a substantial amendment is that substantial amendments trigger our citizen participation plan, which require us to undergo a 30-day public comment period where we put out public notices, social media, emails, etc. We also have a public hearing as well as council approval. The 30-day public comment period is underway right now, and it's going through November 9th. We also have a public hearing and council approval scheduled for next Tuesday night. Next slide, please. So the state of North Carolina Renew NC Single Family Housing Program, we have allocated $3 million to support the state for hard construction costs in this home repair program. They're administrating this assistance to beneficiaries and acting as a subrecipient to the city. We're working to finalize that agreement that council authorized us to enter last week, and we hope to have that in place soon. The applicable funding limits per home were set at $50,000 for rehab and $375,000 for reconstruction. What that means is that if a home's damage assessment comes in at greater than $50,000, they're automatically kicked into a reconstruction. The state is not going to do a $75,000 rehab. They're going straight from rehab to reconstruction at that $50,000 threshold. The state is amending their grant maximum for reconstruction to $450,000 per home in their action plan to reflect the true cost of construction. That's inclusive of mitigation efforts such as elevation or slope stabilization as they're implementing this program. We're also seeking to align our action plan with that updated maximum award amount that the state is adopting to allow for full benefit to Asheville residents. Next slide. The second substantial change that we're proposing is to the Housing and Economic Security Support Services program. This is a $2 million program where we set a minimum project award at $500,000. We are proposing to lower the minimum project award for that program to $250,000 through this substantial amendment process, with the intent of widening the pool of eligible organizations with the financial capacity to deliver requested services. It basically just gives us more flexibility to make choices around who we may select and the type of projects we may select under this program. So if you do the math on this, if our minimum project award was set at $500,000, we would do a maximum of maybe 4 awards. This increases the maximum award amount awardees to potentially 8 organizations or 8 subrecipients or projects that we fund.
But that doesn't change the ability of one organization to get 500.
It does not. It just changes the minimum. So you could certainly see, 2 or 3 organizations get 500,000. You could see an organization get a full $1 million. We just want to lower that threshold because there's potential projects in the community that we've heard floated that $500,000 would just be way too much money, and $250,000 is more in the wheelhouse of being able to fund things that would have a significant impact, though it would not cost as much.
Okay, thanks.
Next slide. And this is a non-substantial amendment. This is, again, just a technical correction to correct a Code of Federal Regulation citation of how we meet the HUD national objectives. We're just making a correction to the citation. But we mention it here for full transparency as it is part of this amendment package so that we're not submitting too many things to HUD. It's all just going as one thing. Next slide. So our next steps is to request City Council to authorize staff to amend the action plan and submit it to HUD for approval. It's currently posted. The amendments are currently posted on ashevillerecovers.org for public comment, and a public hearing will be held at the October 28th City Council meeting. After the 30-day public comment period closes on November 9th, we will request HUD approval of the CDBG-DR Action Plan amendment. And we will also publish the amended action plan to our website. We'll amend all impacted program manuals that have been in development and going through approvals. And we'll implement program activities according to the updated CDBG-DR Action Plan. Next slide. So again, these are just the two amendments, raising the maximum amount for the single family rehab and reconstruction program, reducing the minimum amount for the housing and economic security support services program, and then a technical correction to one citation. And so we're requesting your recommendation to move this item forward to council today. And we have a suggested motion for you.
Council, any questions? Sage?
No questions actually. That was a pretty thorough review. So you kind of answered all my questions, but I'm happy to try and read this motion. It's just fairly lengthy. That was why I went, woo.
Go ahead. Shanika,
Okay.
did you have any
Shanika,
questions?
yeah, I wasn't trying to usurp questions or anything.
Sage?
Okay, I move to recommend that City Council authorize the city manager to submit amendments to the CDBGR-DR action plan to one, reflect an increase to the maximum beneficiary amount under the state of North Carolina Reconstruction and Rehabilitation of Owner Occupied Housing Program from $375,000 to $450,000. Two, to reflect a decrease the minimum project award under the Housing and Economic Security Support Services Program from $500,000 to $250,000. And to three, correct a federal regulation reference under a multifamily housing program from 24 CFR 574.83B3 to the applicable 24 CFR 572.083.
Is there a second?
Second.
You didn't want to amend anything in there? All right.
Okay. Roll call vote. Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith,
Aye.
myself, aye. It passes unanimously. Thanks, James, as always, for presenting so clearly and effectively that we don't have a lot of questions.
I second that. Yeah, I appreciate it, James.
Well,
So,
thanks. I had good support from Elma and the team, and I apologize for making you have to read out CFR citations.
Oh, and thanks, Elma. I didn't see you there. Hey.
Hi there. Thank you so much.
Okay, Nikki, you're up next. Item number 4 on our agenda is a review of Housing Recovery Board and AHAC work plans. And here to present is also Nikki Reed, very clear in her own right. So,
Thank you. Fingers crossed. Let's hope so. So I'm here to present on the Housing Recovery Board and AHAC work plans. And what you'll see is that this month, each of our city council committees are going to be given some insight into the initial work plans for our recovery board. So we're really trying to work together as a team across staff and across these recovery boards to really be consistent and be transparent about the initial work plans. I will say this is just the first glance. I think as we really ramp up our efforts, we can work with this committee on future assignments, but we're really just wanting to provide some insight on what we believe are going to be the first tasks of the board. So next slide, please, Katie. So just as a background and reminder, council established 4 priority recovery areas that serves as the foundation for work plans and allocating resources. Then council committee scopes and work plans are informed by city council's annual recovery priorities and goals. The committee work plans include a combination of ongoing admin items along with policy considerations that include specific assignments for advisory boards and other committees. And then, as I said before, this presentation really wants to outline that first quarter of work for the Housing Recovery Board. And also, we are having in tandem some discussion around the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee to really illustrate that alignment between the work of the Recovery Board, the work of AHAC, and this committee, all focused on housing. So next slide. So this is really a reflection of City Council's work to establish the 4 temporary Helene Recovery Boards: People and Environment, Housing, Infrastructure, Economy. This group in particular is very focused on the Housing Recovery Board. This is all in alignment with council's recovery priorities. These boards will hold regularly scheduled meetings until June 30th of 2027. And then existing advisory boards will continue to provide expertise on an as needed basis. And so that's where you're seeing our alignment here with housing recovery and AHAC. Next slide. Go ahead, Katie. So one thing that was really helpful in looking at how to delineate the tasks between the two boards and really helping to understand that process was to look at council's recovery priorities. These were developed, I believe, back in February around the housing goal. And what we were able to do is really define how the Housing Recovery Board would focus on post-disaster housing challenges type work, and then allow AHAC to really focus in on existing policy tools and partnerships, things like that. So really just taking these goals directly from council's recovery priorities and goals and just looking at how that delineates between the two boards. So again, Housing Recovery Board really focused on post-disaster housing challenges, future displacement events, for example, disaster housing planning, and then really supporting residents through temporary and permanent housing solutions. And then you'll see how AHAC is really well positioned to talk about our existing policy tools and partnerships where we expand those housing options in the city, and then advancing housing stability efforts. So really through this framework was how we started to take a look at HCD's work plan and then further delineate how each board would participate in the development of policy there. So next slide. So zeroing in on the Housing Recovery Board's scope, these statements were really put together to help guide how that board will interact and what type of work they will be taking up. So really in their capacity as an advisory board, these are direct tiebacks to that language that we just reviewed. So this board will provide input to City Council through HCD on policy recommendations that advance post-disaster housing stability efforts, providing input to City Council on policy recommendations that support temporary and permanent housing solutions, provide input to City Council on policy recommendations that support strategies to proactively address future displacement events, and then really support City Council by helping residents navigate post-disaster housing challenges by communicating resources. So really, again, you're seeing how the specific nature of being a policy advisory board plus helping to amplify information and communicating resources is really where we're going to find value in working with the Housing Recovery Board. Next slide. I think we'll get into some more detail. So this slide we took from some of our earlier conversations around how some of the work planning that we're doing on staff's level will start to track on with HCD's work plan. And then from here, again, we're starting to parse out AHAC's work plan and the Housing Recovery Board work plan. So just as a reminder, these are the ongoing topics that are brought to HCD, or elements of these things are brought to HCD for review or for action. And so you're seeing there the CDBG-DR housing. Of course, today you just heard an update on the state partnership for home repairs. We'll have more to come on the multifamily housing funding program of DR, and then a touch point with the emergency shelter plan development as that progresses. So that's really relevant to CDBG-DR, and I'm kind of sharing that as how that will then tie into the Housing Recovery Board work. But then if you look at implementing the affordable housing plan, that's really where we can start to see some linkages to existing policy. And so I'll note expanding home repair resources. That's something that we want to accomplish in this fiscal year. So that's a really important element of our work plan this year, as well as some of the city-owned land development that you've already seen this fiscal year, but that will continue to move forward. The Funders Collaborative Self-Help Credit Union will be excited to come back with updates as that progresses. And then improving the housing data, we heard an update earlier this year on that. So just really kind of starting to look at that workflow. Of course, on the other side of the screen, you're seeing our regular flow of information, our steady state work, the continuum of care updates, housing trust fund allocations. We'll have CDBG funding allocations on our regular schedule. That's our steady state items, the HUD annual action plan. And then again, we'll see at year end in the June-July timeframe, another report on our overall monitoring and investment. So with that framework, then again, we're going to start to then parse out how do the roles of the Housing Recovery Board and AHAC really flow into this overall work plan. So next slide, Katie. All right, so let's keep going. Um, so really wanting to think about that first meeting that we intend to have with the Housing Recovery Board. And that's honestly going to be really good timing with where we seek to position our CDBG housing program. So as you heard, the state's partnership for home repairs, that work is underway. So we really want to make sure that we're sharing information with the Housing Recovery Board and then seeking their assistance with ensuring that our community knows about this resource, that they know that the state's Renew NC program is open and available to city residents, and that they're amplifying that opportunity to their neighbors and friends and community networks. The second piece is really to provide a detailed overview of our multifamily housing program. We hope we're planning to kick that off in December so that it will line up with the tax credit program as we've done with our Housing Trust Fund in the past. So we want to make sure that we give early information to the Housing Recovery Board about that opportunity and really share out about that program and the process that we seek to undertake, especially as that notice of funding opportunity is advertised, hopefully this coming December. So that's really times of the essence with these programs. So we're wanting to make sure that we provide this information to the Housing Recovery Board first. And the next slide, you'll see that we're going to start getting into overall community-wide planning for disaster-related and recovery-related housing efforts. So you're kind of seeing how we're focusing on the CDBG-DR, but then also really wanting to dive in, level set, really understand what's going on in our community around overall housing recovery. So again, in my thinking, because we're a new board with the Housing Recovery Board, we really want to make sure that we do a lot of level setting in the beginning, but a lot of information sharing so that we understand the full context of recovery efforts related to housing so we can really understand how to maximize the city's role. So here I have first item is really that overview of the Helene Recovery Plan. Again, that's a plan that's I think in draft form right now, but it has some detail around the city's long-term plans for recovery and really wanting to provide early information to the board about the scope of that work. I'm also wanting to have a touch point with the LTRG, the long-term recovery group that's been working, so that we really understand what they're focusing on. So again, how to partner and amplify those efforts. And then the last piece is that our continuum of care is also doing emergency planning specific to people experiencing homelessness during disasters. So really understanding what they're doing as well. So again, a lot of level setting there, but I think it'll be necessary so that then in the future meetings, we're really ready to look at how to provide value and really help to have the conversation continue around post-disaster housing planning. So that's just the first sneak peek. I think now we're going to switch into AHAC. So we're going to see how these two committees kind of running parallel are going to start to work. So next slide there, Katie. So this will be up next. So again, our first initial meeting of AHAC, we had a convening of AHAC where they provided their 2 members to join the Housing Recovery Board and 1 recommendation to join the Economic Recovery Board. And so we'll reconvene that group to then start talking about the home repair policy. So first up for them, we'll do a kind of local lessons learned, existing programs. We heard James talk about the CDBG program. This home repair policy is specific to our bond dollars. So we have some different regulations, different things that we can contemplate with this. So we'll just want to kind of understand the local lessons and current practice, and then really hear what the priorities are of AHAC, really understanding what we believe to be the priorities with the city's home repair policy. So really start with that intentional listening session facilitated by staff, and we really work together with the board chair, Andy Barnett, to really craft those listening sessions to be really robust conversations with AHAC. And then that will be followed, next slide, Katie, with then getting into the advisory function of AHAC to really review that first draft, of home repair. So staff will take all that information, the listening session, all that information, come back to AHAC with that first draft, really invite feedback, questions, robust conversation. We'll then probably have a second convening after that first review to look at the final draft, but really start to see how that policy takes shape with AHAC's recommendations. And then that policy will travel up to HCD when it's ready to be adopted. And then in my conversations with Sasha, we also wanted to tag any revisions to our housing trust fund policy will be AHAC's field of work. And so Sasha and I are talking about that right now. We had looked at some prospective bond allocations, how that's going to work with our housing trust fund policy, and really just needing to understand if there's anything that we need to tweak on the existing housing trust fund policy. Really with home ownership concepts, things like that, down payment assistance, we just need to make sure that the housing trust fund policy is current and up to date on what's necessary for those programs to be successful. And that'll be where we have a touch point with AHAC. So next slide, I think kind of takes us back. Yep. So really what we're trying to do here, just give you the initial couple of meetings that we have on the dock for our Housing Recovery Board and for AHAC, and then start to just illustrate how we're taking HCD's work plan, delegating tasks that are coming out of that work plan, and then kind of showing you how that's going to all come together when we have policies ready for review. More to come, of course, and I'm happy to take questions from the committee.
I have a question, Nikki, and thank you. Clear. Um, the actual timeline that you envision, when will the first meeting of AHAC take place? Do we anticipate they'll meet shortly after the broader advisory board, or do we think that what they're working on is on a totally different track?
And I know Sasha could probably help me with this because we've been looking at potential dates. So we
Sure.
have a
Yeah.
large convening with all of our recovery boards currently slated for November 4th. And in our minds, at least, we were thinking of having alternating meetings for AHAC and then the Housing Recovery Board. And Sasha, was it correct? We were thinking that November might be the first convening of AHAC, with then December being the first official convening of the Housing Recovery Board.
That's correct. So we've discussed with the chair having a meeting of AHAC before the end of the year. So at least to get started, get their feedback, maybe give them some homework. And then I would anticipate them then meeting in early January. And so, which would set us up for that alternating schedule.
Okay, I like that notion. Council, any other questions? Okay, Sage.
Can you go back to the early on slide that says alignment with HCD's work plan? It's maybe like, they're not numbered. I guess in the deck, it's page 7.
Yeah.
I just had one kind of comment or possible suggestion, because I know this is going to, roll out into our overall plan, but given what we learned, like even through the latest ULI presentation and the housing assessment and stuff, and this is all great stuff, but I'm wondering if we want to highlight something specific around whether it's education or programming, or just acknowledging and knowing it's going to be a topic around helping, protecting, rebuilding, better understanding the impacts to some of our more vulnerable neighborhoods, whether or not we name them, but at least they're identified, because I know it's a topic. And if we're going to be doing this collaboration thing with AHAC, I kind of want our HCD, energy around that in here. We know there's been a call to kind of reinvest and look at some of the more vulnerable areas. Anybody else feel that this is really great, but it's also, we have this other priority looming that isn't identified?
I also share that desire, Sage. Thanks for highlighting that.
Okay. Just a suggestion.
I appreciate that. It reminds me of a lot of our earlier conversations when we were discussing work plan to really identify anti-displacement as part of our work plan. So I'm hearing that as a necessary element into this. So
Yeah.
I know
However it's
certainly,
worded.
Yeah, I well, because I believe it will absolutely come up as we talk about home repair, but I hear you certainly wanting to make sure that it is seen on our work plan.
Thanks. Otherwise, this looks great. I mean, I am kind of like taken aback when we do these reviews and I look at the breadth of the work that is going to be done. In some ways, like just like after COVID and there was some money to work with, it's both devastating what we've been going through, but there's like these interesting blessings that come with it that we can actually make movement with. Like just, these are big things and it's just a rare opportunity. So just calling out kind of a grand appreciation for it all.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much, Nikki. And moving on to item number 5 on the agenda, it's a follow-up to the anti-displacement discussion. I'll hand it over to you, Stephanie Dahl.
Thank you so much, Chair Mosley. Perfect setup and roll into this discussion from adding that anti-displacement topic onto the Housing Recovery Board. So as a reminder, last month we started a presentation that is meant to facilitate discussion between HCD members and staff about anti-displacement and maybe some options moving forward. First, setting some foundations so that we're all on the same page. That looked last time like knowing what the definitions for the different type of displacement, what they are, and knowing that they all can be temporary or permanent displacement. But also we talked about the affordable housing plan's approach to increasing our housing supply and stabilizing neighborhoods at the same time, that really this is a balancing act, and that without that neighborhood stabilization, housing supply and production runs the risk of harming vulnerable neighborhoods. So next slide. Today, we're continuing that discussion by providing one reference slide to go back to those operational definitions, just making sure we're all on the same page, sharing it with the people at home, and then providing some additional data on the housing pipeline since 2018, specifically looking at conditional zonings and also including one way to assess current rental housing production levels that we're seeing since 2018. And then we're including an excerpt from the comprehensive plan, just food for thought, about the negative impacts of displacement based on income, and also updating our map so that it is now a map viewer and that you'll be able to look at the locations of those conditional zonings with another layer that shows the average median income for the area and also includes information on what we're calling the 7F parcels. So that will be a tool for you all for discussion. Next slide. Okay, really quickly, we noted that physical, economic, and cultural and social displacement are all valid types of displacement, as well as environmental displacement, which happens during usually like a natural disaster or climate-related issues. Next slide. I'll leave those for others to read on their own. And we looked at kind of 4 questions when bringing you back some data today. One of those questions was, how much of what council has approved through the conditional zoning process is built or likely to be built? How much of that housing that you've approved includes city investments for affordability, which makes those a better fit for some of our lower income residents? Where are those approved projects happening? And then do we think that the large residential projects that are being approved are making a dent in the housing gap? Next slide. So some data. Okay. This is refined from last time, but some of the numbers are going to be very similar to what you heard. So first of all, through the conditional zoning process, those are large projects that you look at from a council perspective. There have been 6,794 units of housing or homes approved. We're going to make an assumption, and you'll see why in a minute, that these are mostly for rent and not for sale. That's not necessarily true, but it is an okay proxy for us for this discussion. And just as a note, our permitting process doesn't really allow us to say whether they are for sale or for rent. And that is something that we just need to do manually. And we're looking at doing that moving forward. So out of that, okay, Chair Mosley.
No, go ahead and finish it, then I'll ask the question.
Okay. So out of that, about 60% of those units that you've approved are what we're going to call viable. And that means they've been built, they have somehow pulled a permit and are under construction, or based on our outreach, we've called all the development teams. They've said that they are likely to still build it and are looking for financing or have some other issues, but are very positive about moving forward. So 60%. Yes.
Okay, here's my question. I believe in the last meeting, what we saw was about 25% that were moving forward. So my question is, what accounts for the difference between last meeting and now? Is it the phone calls and folks said we're moving forward?
It is. You got it right. So during that time period, we called everybody. And I mean, this is, take this with a grain of salt. Maybe if you want to think of it as somewhere between 25 and 60% might be coming forward, but we did include only the projects that people had a pretty positive spin on.
Did they give an indication of why it's taking long? Like, what is the issue that's
Most of it is financing.
financing?
It's fine. Yeah. So there are a variety of issues. Not every single project said financing, and projects that said definitely no, we are not moving forward. They had some more interesting and nuanced answers, including things like the topography was just much more challenging than we thought. The market has changed, things like that.
Okay, and then one more thing. So how long have they been waiting? Like, what would you say the average
Well,
wait?
that's a good question. I'll
approval?
crunch that. Yeah, I'll crunch that and see it would be great to do a correlation between when were these conditional zonings approved and how long has it been before they enter into the pipeline.
Okay, thanks.
Steph, in that vein, just because we're talking about it at the moment, when they say financing, I'm kind of curious if you kind of pursued more information, but I'm hearing two things. One is unavailable or extreme means of capital versus interest rates and killing the project. The difference. And I'm wondering if you asked any or ascertained any of that additional information, because, when I think about what this next kind of couple lines say and financing these projects and then city investment playing such a successful role, did you ask any more deeper financial?
So I appreciate you moving ahead and noticing that there is a pretty good correlation between when the city makes an investment and affordability in these projects actually moving forward. I don't have real detailed information to share about the specifics about financing, but I certainly can follow up with you all about that.
Well, what made me ask this is that we did get an email from one development that said, we lost our financing option or whatever. Is the city doing any loans? And it just makes me wonder if we are able to identify that. So if there's any follow-up, maybe consider those.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and we're having conversations with Nikki's team, especially Sasha, about how to connect people to resources and potentially looking at the pipeline for affordability. But I have some news that's not on these slides as well from Sasha to share. I'm going to get back to this affordability component and just say that. So about 35% of the conditional zonings that you all approved included some level of city affordability investment. And I don't have it in these slides, but note that in the past 7 years, there's $34,361,282 city dollars right now. That number is going to be confirmed by Sasha later, but that's why it's not on the slide. That you all have invested in these projects, and about 50% of that was through Luigi. 25% of that was just Housing Trust Fund, and then the remaining 25% was a combination. That's about $8 million. That could be bond, Housing Trust Fund, or Luigi, where people had multiple options there. So as you noted, yes, 87, almost 90% of projects that receive city funding are moving forward. So next slide. All right, so I wanted to insert this data. It's an excerpt from the comprehensive plan, what our comprehensive plan right now says about displacement. Note that there are a lot of things in our comprehensive plan that speak about displacement, but don't use the word. But this is the one time that the word displacement is actually used. And what it says is, the potential displacement of low and middle income households would not only alter the character and dynamic of the city, but would also push development outward into other parts of the region, leading to suburban sprawl and increasing traffic that would negatively impact the environment and agrarian landscape surrounding the city. So just as a note for conversation moving forward, when you are looking at conditional zonings, one of the things you are analyzing them for is their alignment with our comprehensive plan. Next slide. So I am going to ask Katie. Well, actually, maybe I can share. Katie, am I able to take over sharing here for a minute?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing right now for you.
And Steph, real quick, while you move to that sharing, I just want to note for the public that we did not have this presentation in our original materials, but it is now in the documents folder posted online. So this link that Steph is going to will be available through this presentation that's now in the documents folder. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks, Steph.
Great, thank you. All right, so I just wanted to share this viewer with you all briefly and note that what you're seeing right now is we'll call it a color ramp. The lighter areas of the city, and this is by census tract, are the lower income areas of the city. The lighter the area, the lower the average median income of that census tract. And so the darker areas, I think that you can see, for example, right here, the most northern part of the city, we have an area where the average median income there for household is over $100,000. And some of the other areas you'll see they range, there's a low of maybe like $30,000 for that average median income. And then you're going to see these housing icons. These are where the CZs have been approved. Okay. And so there's quite a few of them. I'm just showing this area in the south on purpose because it is one of our faster growing areas, especially with multifamily. And today we're just talking about multifamily housing production. And then if you are when you look at this, there's a layers icon on the left, and you can this little eyeball is show or not show. I'm going to now show the 7F parcels. So the 7F parcels are the combination of parcels for our legacy neighborhoods and also our neighborhoods where we have looked at data around housing tenure, rental versus home ownership, educational attainment, and other demographics that have been used through our missing middle housing study to demonstrate that these areas are more vulnerable to displacement. So this tool is available for you and for the public to take a look at where these developments have occurred, what neighborhoods they are close to, what the income levels are for certain folks. And if you click on the houses, this is where it gets a little wonky if you're not really familiar with using a GIS viewer. But stick with it and you can play with it and click on some of the data and it will actually tell you the location of the development proposal. Just a note that these include CZs from 2018, both those that have been built and are viable, maybe possibly going to be built, and then other ones as well. Councilperson Turner.
Just real quick to make sure I'm not incorrectly assuming something about data. You keep saying average median income. Are these area median incomes, or is there some averaging thing happening? I'm
There,
thinking middle point.
you know what? That's right. You can't say average and median. It's
I
an
just didn't
area
know if you
median.
were like
You're
blending
so
something
correct.
to make a
It's just
point,
coming
but
out of my
okay,
mouth.
so area. Okay.
You're correct, and thank you for that correction. It
I
is the
just,
area.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
So, first of all, this is really helpful. Second of all, so what are we calling 7F parcels? How can I tie in the 7F parcels and the opportunity zone requests that the legacy neighborhoods made?
What we can
Just add
do
the
is
layer.
we can add, yeah, we'll just add a
Just
layer.
add the layer.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then have you done any broad analysis? What I mean is, so this is really helpful to see the census tracts and the income per. Can you see if we're more or less likely to approve in areas with lower AMIs? Or we're
We can,
not like, is that another layering?
that would be an
Take out
analysis
buffering.
that we haven't done yet, but that we are looking at. We're trying to what would happen is that we could look at where these proposals are happening.
Mm.
We could look not only to see where those affordable units are being offered, and if there's a higher percent or a lower percent near some of the legacy neighborhoods or opportunity zones. So there's the variety of analyses that if you give us those questions, we'll work on them.
And you know what I would also love to know is, even if they are affordable in the true term of art sense,
Mhm.
are they in areas where the AMI is below the affordable threshold?
Mhm. Yeah,
Right.
these are great
So
questions.
if I
for
have an
us to look at.
80% in that 20,455, is that unintentionally perhaps displacing someone at that 2455 level?
Right.
Okay.
And we will be able to explain to you some of the reasons, like for example, that area median income level, like in that section of downtown, we do know that there's a preponderance of senior subsidized housing. So there are 3 large apartment buildings. It's not to say that that's the only reason that is the um, income level that's there, but we can also further try to, whether it's through data or anecdotes, try to characterize how this is impacting certain neighborhoods.
Okay, Sage.
Yeah, I mean, you can really go in the weeds there, right? But I guess if you extracted all the senior living or programmed housing, you'd get a better nature of the workforce reality, right? Or the actual, you know what
That's
I mean?
Yeah, and I think what we're having conversations about is that, the 2025 housing needs assessment that you all just heard about from Mr. Bowen, you do have it broken down as opportunities, both with rental units and for sale units, but there's also this need for over 4,000 units of senior housing.
Yeah.
So, and that's going to be throughout the community, but we could take a look at some of the demographic information and look where those older communities, potentially looking at data like where are there a preponderance of older residents that have lower incomes that may need those investments in senior housing, right?
Right.
Maybe
What
in
I
their
heard
neighborhood.
Antoinette
Yeah.
saying was that, like, if we've got an area that's saying the median income is 20,000, and then we're subsidizing and doing all this work and investing to create housing that's 40,000, did we just not only displace somebody, did we also just impact the AMI and kind of inflate the area, thereby hurting everyone? It's a
And-
really in the weeds conversation, but
And does that lead to sprawl?
I mean, everything at this point is leading to sprawl, but not to be a downer. The real reason I raised my hand was to say 7F, 7F. I keep hearing it. It's referencing a map. I get it. Before we get too far into these things, is 7F an adequate name? Do we want to call it something else? Why is it 7F?
Because that's the part of the UDO
The
where
study,
the map that y'all
right. So,
did.
we can adopt that, or we could call it something else in these early stages. It's just an idea because 7F is just so random.
Okay, so
Okay, I have stopped sharing. Katie, if we could go to the next slide, if you want to share again. Okay, so we've been playing around with some of the data to look at the housing gap, and one way we wanted to share that you could look at it is just through the eyes of what's the housing gap for rental right now, since we're talking about conditional zonings and those are mostly rental products. So in the most recent housing needs assessment, there was a report that 6,441 units are needed in the next 5 years, basically. So it's really 2024 data through 2029, but it's our current 25 housing needs assessment. So what we did, just as a way to look at it, is say, okay, let's take a look at the number of viable rental units that are actually being produced on average based on the numbers we looked at 2 slides ago via these large projects versus the number of units we need per year. And so one way to look at it is just to say, it looks like production is about half of what is needed right now. But I wanted to take time to say that there is some good news. There is some hope about housing production and specifically affordable housing production. So I'm sure when Sasha gets some more information, she's going to provide you with the details. But she did share with me that there are 2 existing projects that haven't been counted yet as affordable projects. So I said there were 16. There's gonna be 18, it looks like. So we'll be able to add that to the mix. And in addition, there's over 800 units of proposed housing through LIHTC projects, which those are not all gonna come to fruition. But again, it's the pipeline that we're talking about here. But that's a large number of affordable units that we're hoping that we can report out on in the coming year at HCD. And I mentioned this before, just as far as this data right here, but that our permit data does not differentiate between for rent and for sale products. So this is just for the sake of discussion. It is not an exact science as far as how many rental units are actually being produced. And again, I'm calling viable anything that either has been built, we have a CO or a TCO on it, it's pulled some other kind of permit moving forward in this process. And or the development team has told us that they feel positive in the next 24 months that they're going to be moving forward. So any question on this gap? Yeah, okay, great. Let's move to the next slide. So this is just a repeat of our key takeaways. This is just for discussion. And then the last slide here is just open for questions. And we are interested in hearing any of your feedback about things you'd like to hear about moving forward.
So we're now saying we're achieving or we're seeing about 35% of these bigger projects get built. And then if we're investing, we're seeing a higher percentage. Do you take that to mean to achieve our goal, we need to be approving like 3 times as many projects?
I have not made a definitive opinion yet of how I feel about this data, and I'm really interested in what you all think about
You
it.
know, I have mixed feelings. I am a longtime housing advocate, and I kind of think, we have this, what for lack of a better word, we have a growth boundary, right? And so we have to build in and up. Just always worry we're never really going to achieve it. So, like, let's say we do all this in 5 years, we'll still be sitting here saying, well, now we need 4,217, and it's just always going to be that way. And it just concerns me. We'll always chase this, but what's the rate of success and what are the tools of success? Like, if we're just churning out units and they're corroding the culture and fabric of our existing neighborhoods, and you build it and they will come, and are we achieving the affordability we really want, and to what end do we just build, it's kind of, I get a little torn in there philosophically.
I would just feel better if I could look at that, the visual of where we've built and which neighborhoods according to income. Can we go back to that slide just so I can?
The map. And
Yeah.
then we're so small. Like, if you threw a buffer around there and said a quarter mile from every 7F parcel, every project would be in it. I mean, I would just guess that 80% are. We'll have a few outliers, but like, it's so
So
many.
I wonder if, in addition, because we're also kind of hitting South Asheville kind of hard, right? It looks like, right?
They had land.
I wonder if down the road, we also need to consider strategies for incentivizing building in some of those higher income areas as well, because we need supply. Yeah, I just,
My brain heard 101 Charlotte Street. It's just those big projects seem to fail in some of those areas, but
which one is 101? Is that the Fuddruckers or the one?
no, that one passed, right? That's in there somewhere. And I was talking about across the street with the historic houses. It was a pretty impactful and emotional project because there was demolition and history involved.
Well, my experience is they're all emotional projects.
It has become that way.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I thought we were going to have a discussion about like a toolkit that on every project that comes to us, there's a type of displacement analysis.
Great. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay.
If we go back a couple slides, you'll note that the title of one of the slides that speaks to the comprehensive plan, it does say displacement analysis. We have, next slide, Katie. I think you went past it. So it's 2 slides. There you go, right there. So we, in the past month, what we have been doing is taking a look at what other cities in the Southeast are doing for anti-displacement programs, and whether or not they have any kind of displacement analysis, whether that be formal or informal. And so we have not found a lot of formalized displacement analyses, but we did find, for instance, that people, when they're looking at approvals, they are looking at an alignment with their comprehensive plan, because that is something in the state of North Carolina that is legal, legally that you're required to do. And I think that we also saw that there was some level of looking at projects like through a threshold lens for displacement analyses. So this might look like, if it's a small infill project, this project is going to be deemed as not meeting a threshold for triggering considerations for like anti-displacement investments, because I think the other piece of it is identifying what would be the goal for council to have a displacement and analyses. There might be a goal around informing your review of conditional zoning projects, or there might be a goal of looking at investments and programs in specific geographies or for specific populations that would mitigate displacement. And it could be any of the types of displacement. So it's a complex web. There are displacement analyses. They're not called that, but thresholds where people are looking at community benefit agreements, and those are voluntary. And what we're talking about in this state, we did also see that people are identifying which neighborhood or for each neighborhood, what their top priorities are regarding the type of displacement they want to prevent, and then tailoring investments to that. So some communities might be most concerned about economic displacement, especially lower income populations. Some communities might, and those folks might be most interested in programs or investments that mitigate, for example, them not being able to pay their increasing taxes, right? That's one that we will commonly see. We also see home repairs for that one.
I think this would be a great opportunity for us to speak with the folks in the 7F parcels to see what displacement analysis would look like to them, which
Right.
of the notions that you just mentioned mattered most to them. And then what I can say is, from my vantage point, it would be helpful to me when any project comes along that there is a low, medium, or high threshold that each development would fall into. So maybe we could start right there with community engagement and actually learning. And we'll start with the folks in 7F, if that's something that makes sense.
For staff, it makes sense, especially in addition to doing this research this past month, we're also and working as we create the roadmap to updating the comprehensive plan in advance to redoing the UDO. We're exploring options to work with legacy neighborhoods, lower income communities, other vulnerable, artist communities, but definitely legacy neighborhoods or 7F parcels, and identify the things that you're just talking about. So I think it's really in alignment.
And actually, if you did 7F and opportunity zones, you pull in the artists at the same time, because typically what they are is in that area.
Right.
It's going to be a little different, so I want to make sure you're done with that. Okay. Back to the mapping for a second, staff. The one piece of information stands out to me as possibly missing. If we're going to do all our CZs around the city, it might be really helpful to understand what's happening just over the city line into the county. Because I know that we are seeing a lot of projects just into the county, and it may help us understand and tell a different picture. The other thing is, I know when I meet with my colleagues, I really appreciate that I have a GIS background, but I hear them asking questions that I think they would love to see, just an opportunity to have a flush list of layers they can click on and off. And like I heard Antoinette asking for OZs on this map, and can we get a tool that has some of that? Like if we could add OZs, if someone could, like in the data for these CZ projects that says the unit count, but it doesn't say the affordability or the tools used to get there, if any, like a simple pop-up for each of those little house icons would be so helpful to the user. And I know we've got, these are, minor skills. We've got way skilled GIS staff, so it's easy. And then the last one would be like, what if the transportation corridors were also a layer you could check? I think it would help some of my colleagues to really understand that those tools are really simple for us to add, and they could just click them on and off. So I'm asking on my behalf and theirs, but could we add those possibly to this particular map?
We're gonna, we'll add what we can for sure, and we can bring that back or share it out via email There's some information, I mentioned this, not to be a Debbie Downer, but there's some information that we're pulling really manually.
Yeah.
And get excited because we're moving to a new technology, a great new software system through our permit center next year, and that's going to take care of some of this. But we'll be able to get that, and I would say that we could manually enter in some of that, like that affordability bit.
Yeah, I mean, I almost wonder
Mhm.
if like council could just have its own designated map and like all the things in our database are there and we can just use it as a tool. And so, I mean, I have my own ArcGIS account, but I got to build and use credits to take all our multiple maps and build the data I want as a council person to look at it. You know what I mean? If you're a GIS person, you do. And I just wonder, like, council could probably benefit from its own tool saved on our page within our ArcGIS database that is just layers on and off as they need them.
Yes, and I'm sure that our communities would also like access to these tools. Some of these things are up on the web. I do want to note
Yeah.
that we do have, but they how do I say
You
it?
can't always build what you want though. Like that's what I'm saying. There are many public pieces out there.
Yeah, and actually I think it's time for us to update the viewers we have and maybe let it be known that they're accessible and how to use them. So it's a great point, and we certainly will take guidance from you all about what you would like to see as you're thinking about policies this coming year that can address the housing and anti-displacement issues. Okay. Anything else?
Any more questions or comments from council? Okay, well, thank you.
Just to
Steph.
thank you for producing this. I mean, we
Yeah.
just recently asked for it and you bam, got it. And I really appreciate that hyper response because it just helps us so inform this process.
Yeah, this is
Great
really
work.
good.
Yeah.
We're happy to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
I know we always ask for more, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great, 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 great. Now, moving on to the final item on our agenda, which is public comment. Katie, do we have any callers in the queue?
A moment, let me just reload to double check. No, Madam Chair, we do not.
Okay, well, thank you. And thanks everyone for a very efficient meeting. It was a lot to take in, and I appreciate staff's work. We will see you next meeting. Y'all have a good rest of your day. We're adjourned.